welcome back to another exciting half hour.
Cambridge InsideOut. Special guest Marc McGovern.
You guys are good at that.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Councillor Marc McGovern.
Yeah.
No, Vice Mayor.
Vice Mayor, right?
Oh,
Councillor.
though actually, Glenn Kuchar always would point out there is no such thing as the Vice Mayor. There's only the Vice Chair. And I noticed Donna Lopez, the city clerk, always referred to the election of the Vice Chair.
Right, and then Vice Mayor when I was getting sworn in.
Yeah.
So whatever.
Oh, okay.
So it's Vice Mayor by tradition, Vice Chair according to the technical reading of the charter.
Right,
Right,
because if
yeah.
you run a meeting, it would be as
Right.
Yeah.
whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And
Whatever.
and if the mayor goes down, the Vice Mayor doesn't become mayor.
Yeah, I checked that.
Check that.
Yeah.
Oh, is that true?
Denise and I were alone in an elevator. I said, "So Denise, if something happens to you, do I,
Automatically become mayor?
I think it is the default person. The Vice Mayor will
Interim.
chair the meeting.
Okay.
If the chair is not there or
I
whatever.
see.
I think that's really
It's not like vice president.
All right.
right.
Okay.
Yeah. It's in some years it's actually been sort of an acknowledgement of somebody who's sort of helped to facilitate the election of the mayor or otherwise played a role, but not always. Right. So anyway, as promised in the first hour, we thought what we'd do is sort of walk through what I was calling the unfinished business of the last council term with an eye toward the future.
Yes.
Not always looking back. Now, several of the things that were, I guess, really always on the burner in Cambridge are things having to do with housing.
Yeah.
Affordable housing in particular. Even that's sort of a ambiguous term because
What's affordable?
when we
Right.
talk about
Exactly.
affordable housing, we're usually talking about
Yeah.
something where you apply for housing through an agency to get, which is different than affordable housing when I came here, which meant you look for an apartment and it was affordable.
Right.
Well, it was
And you
under rent control, probably,
Right.
when you came here.
Right, but the point is you didn't
Yeah.
actually apply to the housing
Right.
authority to get it,
Exactly.
Right.
or go into a
Right.
lottery or
Right.
anything like that.
Yeah.
Right.
So I don't know if it's even possible to solve the affordability problem,
Good point.
which
yeah.
is really the most difficult aspect for middle income people.
Yeah.
Right, but you guys definitely moved a lot in the direction of affordable housing, in particular ones here. But there were some initiatives that were suggested that I don't know whether they're still sitting at staff level or whatever, but maybe you can comment on these. For example, it was a proposal for what was called an affordable housing overlay.
Yes.
I didn't fully understand that, but I thought it was.
I think it was Councillor Toomey, I think, that put that in. And, because it basically would look at, for the entire city, trying to provide incentives for developers to build affordable housing.
Especially in places
You
that
know,
hadn't had it or.
Well,
yeah.
That's part of it.
Yeah.
The climate around building affordable housing is so dramatically different than what it was 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And sometimes we find ourselves, I think, in this city having the conversation as if we're still back
Right.
in the days of rent control. And as much as, some people would like that, some people
Yeah.
wouldn't, that's a whole other conversation.
Gone, right.
But
Yeah.
that's not the environment in which we have to play with the cards we're dealt, right? And do what we can. And I often say to people, I'd love to go out and have a beer with you and talk about, the good old days and good and bad, but that you can't govern that way, right? You have to, and so
it's not
the
going back either,
right,
no.
and the overlay district was in part a way to look at how do we get affordable housing built more widely across the
Sure.
city and not so much concentrated.
Right.
And this is, we see this with medical marijuana, we see this with homeless shelters, we see this
Right.
with affordable housing. People are great progressives in Cambridge. Until it impacts their daily
Yeah.
life, right?
Yeah, the
and
whole-
then
Yeah.
are you going to put your chips on the table or are
Right.
you not? And
Right.
Cambridge voted at 80% for medical marijuana, but the few times that people have come to us for a dispensary, people from that neighborhood
Oh,
come out and
really?
say, "Don't put it near me. I love the cause. Don't put it near me."
Oh.
And affordable housing, very similar.
Usually
We
the
need
same
more
story.
affordable housing.
Yeah.
We need more affordable housing. Oh, you're going to put up affordable housing
Yeah.
across the street from my house? Maybe not. And these are gut check votes.
I'm going to say one thing which I think is sort of, I think this is a fact, is that for the longest time, just the building of housing, period, just wasn't really happening.
Right.
It was a long delay for decades, really. Now, honestly, when you look, people can call it luxury, whether it is or isn't, but housing is being built. That machine has revved up again.
Yeah.
If you go look in Boston, you see the cranes going up. You can look in Everett, you can look in Somerville, you can look in Cambridge. You can see over in Austin, Brighton, and there's some really creative ones. Some are more affordable, some are less affordable, but housing stock is being built finally.
Right.
And ultimately that will have good results.
You know, here's the deal, and this is what I said to people all last term. Cambridge is a desirable place to live. People, now that the industry has changed, it's not candy factories anymore. It's,
Right.
it's biotech,
Right.
it's pharmaceuticals, it's
Yeah.
people making very good salaries. They want to live here for all the same reasons we all want to live here. They're coming, and they're coming whether you like them to come or not, right?
Right.
And that's a whole other conversation.
Right.
But if we don't provide more housing, what are they going to do? Is it? Are they going to not live here? No, they're going to.
They're going to
They're going to bid up
what
what is here, right? And that's what the actual data has shown us, is that
Yeah.
rents went up at a far greater rate when we during that time when we
Because
weren't
there was
building housing.
less available,
because there's
so
less
they're-
available,
right.
and
Choke
you know
it out.
this idea that somehow we're going to lower rents by not providing housing, or that we're going to keep people out of Cambridge.
They're coming.
Yeah.
They're coming, you
Yeah.
know, and
They're-
either we try to meet
Yeah.
that need, or
Right.
they're going to jack up the prices, you know, on what's here. And
Right.
Now,
Right.
one other thing that was discussed, I think, in connection with a number of specific projects, but we were able to negotiate higher than the percentage of the current 15% inclusionary
Yeah.
zoning requirement.
yeah,
Now,
so
but part of what you guys talked about with this previous council was the possibility, even Marjorie Decker before,
Yeah.
actually, about maybe changing it from the 15% to maybe 18% or 20%
Right,
or whatever.
right.
So is that something where there's?
yeah, that study
desire-
is being done, and supposedly
What does that
is
mean
com-
exactly?
So the inclusionary zoning percentage right now is 15%.
Okay.
In reality, it's 11.5%.
But what does
when you
that
take
mean?
bonus.
What-
So that means any residential
Yeah.
development over 10 units, a percentage of those units
Oh, have to be- fall within a certain-
go back to the city for the city's inclusionary zoning program that the city
Okay.
then gives to people who are on their list and
The
who have
mod- the
applied,
for-
right?
okay.
So really, it's 11.5%
Well,
because
the-
of height,
well,
density bonuses and
Right,
whatnot.
but what happens there is that, so if you want to build 10 and the city says, we will mandate you must give one, but in exchange, we'll now let you build another.
Right.
So,
Another market.
right, so then you end up with
Tit
one
for
out of,
tat.
yeah.
Yeah.
So-
Right,
So,
right.
so
So
it adjusts. it's
It
not
adjusts,
15%.
right?
Right.
And so it's not. So we had a couple projects in front of us this year where we were able to push that number up to, in the terms of Mass and Main here across the street, 20%, and now with the MXD district in Kendall Square, 25%.
Wow.
Which I think is great.
Yeah.
And we filed a policy order. I was lead sponsor on the policy order to do a study to look at really how high could we get that percentage without really kind of shooting ourselves in the foot and getting nothing, right? I mean,
Right.
you know, there are some people who are saying raise it to 33%. Well, I would love to raise it
Yeah.
to 33% if the data we get back shows that we can raise it to 33%
Right.
and still have housing be built, right? We can raise it to any number we want,
But it may not.
but if
get
it's
built.
not financially viable for people to actually build,
Right.
then you get nothing.
Right.
So you've got to find that, you know, it's the sweet spot on the
Sure.
baseball bat. You know,
Yeah.
how high can we raise it? I would say that I want developers to scream but not run away.
Yeah.
mean,
You know, and that I want to find what that number is and go as high as we
So
possibly
I'm
can.
gonna presume that one of the agenda items when the housing committee gets together, or maybe there'll be new
Is there,
policy
so it's
orders.
specifically a housing committee?
It actually came up. It came up through the full city council. That study is. I mean, from what I understand, what I've been told, it's basically done, and we
Right.
should be getting it January, February,
Right.
and then we will see kind of what those recommendations are
Right.
and where we
So
go. But
that's-
other housing committee stuff, we're looking at. Somerville has a condominium conversion committee, and one of the things that they look at is that if anybody buys housing that they want to convert into condos, there's a 2-year wait
Huh.
for them to do that.
Okay.
I would love to see us do something like that, and that's something.
We
that-
actually had the option of doing that, but the thing is that I think that provision from state law goes back a ways, back before we felt it was needed. Maybe we should have enacted it like Somerville did way back then
Yeah,
too, but.
yeah. I'll tell you, the
2020
biggest, when we talk about displacement of people in Cambridge, it's not the new housing in my opinion, the new housing that gets built in places where there was no housing.
Right.
The old
It's the old multifamily that
That
somebody
get bought
comes in,
with cash.
gets
Yeah.
bought with cash.
Yeah.
They kick everybody out.
Right.
The rents go up in Harding Street. They went
Yeah.
up 1,000%.
1,000%,
They went
wow.
from people were paying $600 and they went up to 3,000.
Same owner bought the building next to me.
Yeah, and the same, right,
Right
and
on,
and you know those are real people
Yeah.
that are getting kicked out.
600 for one
And
bedroom.
That,
or
the-
something.
the-
and,
that's the real
That's-
truth is
yeah.
that those multifamily 2 and 3 and 4 family houses in Cambridge, that's where the middle class housing in Cambridge was.
Right.
Right.
And that's really where it's disappeared.
Right, and we've got to be much more intentional about how do we offer some protections. We because of in the rent control ordinance or the law that when rent control was lost, there's a whole lot in there around what you can and cannot do. So it's you don't have as much wiggle room
Right.
as you would like, but there are things that we can do that at least buys people time. You know, at least it says, you know, your rent's not going to go up for a year, or your rent's
Right.
not going to go up for 2 years. So at least people have an opportunity, you know, as opposed to what happens now,
Yeah.
where sometimes within a month or two, especially if it's tenants at will, that people are just, you know, they're kicked out and
Yeah.
and they're forced to leave. And
Yeah.
I mean, you know, Patrick Barrett, who was on this program
Yeah.
recently, he told me one time, he said he actually did the math and worked out what is there an actual value in being a good landlord, being good to your tenants and being fair. And he says that actually there's a benefit to being it. You can measure it. Right?
Yep.
You know, so when you buy ill will, it doesn't always end up helping you financially.
Yep,
So now another big item that was it was certainly a lot of the rhetoric of the past council was the master plan, which then was called citywide plan, which may eventually be given some new name like
new name, right.
Envision Cambridge or Cambridge on Wheels or whatever. But the thing is that so the process is in. There's a consultant hired now, presumably, probably like this coming month.
Yeah.
There must be plans to start getting people together and having meetings and actually starting to go through all of this. So do you have any sense of where that stands and what we should be looking for next?
Yeah, so at this point they're gathering a lot of information. One of the things I really liked about the consultant that was chosen, and it was Utile, and the council didn't have any say in it, but they were my pick. Just after seeing the presentations, is that they really understand that there's already been a lot of work done.
Right.
Right. They weren't talking about reinventing the wheel on everything. They weren't talking about, there is a lot of planning that has happened in this city, despite what some people say, and we need to build on that. We need to tweak that. We need to take the good parts of that and keep them, and the parts that aren't as good, fix them. So right now they're kind of accumulating all of that data and all of that information, and then there'll be different public meetings, and they'll kind of go from there.
Can I just ask, because I'm just kind of new at all this stuff with the housing. You said something before, though, that was going to be ready, a report that was ready on a housing. So how does that fit into the master plan?
Yeah, this comes up
Okay.
a lot because when we passed, when we voted to do a master plan, to start a
Yeah.
master plan, one of the things that every councilor said was the master plan is not meant to stop other work and other development that's going on in the city.
Some people tried
Some people tried, yeah,
Okay.
play
yeah.
it that way.
Some people did, but if you really look back, every single councilor said, this is not a moratorium
Right.
On
on
any
development.
kind of
So
development.
things are going to move forward. We're
I
going to
see what you're
continue
saying.
to work.
Right.
And so, if we pass an inclusionary zoning percentage greater than what's there now,
Okay.
and I haven't seen the report, so I
Yeah.
don't know what the recommendation will
Yeah.
be, but if we go to 18%, 20%, 50%, whatever it says, that will be incorporated into the
That's
master
what I was
plan.
trying to understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right now,
All right.
I think it's fair to say that many of the people who are proponents of the master plan process define most of things in terms of population, density, heights, and building of buildings, whatever. But I think it's fair to say that a master plan is also about things like housing policy, transportation, planning.
Environmental impact.
Yeah,
Sewage,
many other
water,
things.
everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I think one of the real concerns about this whole process is, will it be the people who are participating be representative of the whole city?
Right.
That's a tricky thing.
It's a very tricky thing, and I've said a million times, if the people if the only input we get are from people who look like me,
Yeah.
we're in trouble. And it's not going to be the citywide vision that it needs to be. And so it's going to be, they're going to really have to,
Right. And as I've often
they're going to have to really work hard to
I've
make
often
sure they
joked
reach
and
out.
said if city planning was governed by who showed up at council meetings on Monday nights, we'd have a hell of a weird city.
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of good that comes out of
I know,
of that too.
I know.
But I'm
But-
going to ask
but yeah.
another thing. What about the whole net zero report that got completed? How does that fit into
That
it?
they
Is
that they're pulling all
so
that
they're,
stuff
so
together.
basically they're looking at
Actually-
all of the things that have been done and coming up with a overall.
People I know in the community development department
Yeah.
openly said that they were looking forward to when this process got going,
Right.
was to weave it in with
Exactly.
the climate change
Okay.
vulnerability
Because
study,
they did a lot of stuff
the
on
net
this.
zero,
Right,
and
okay.
all of these things, so that it's a unified approach.
Right.
Well, that's good.
And that's
all
you
good
know,
then.
and that is good. And you know, the one of the things where I think a master plan will be helpful is when we look at if we look at a development in Kendall Square, we don't really look at how that impacts traffic,
Right,
for example.
exactly.
We look at how it impacts traffic in Kendall Square,
But we're not
but
looking at the
not
whole
Central
picture.
Square,
Yeah.
right? And we're such a small
Or-
city, and that traffic in Kendall Square impacts Central, which impacts Mid Cambridge, which impacts
Yeah, but let's
you know,
not stop
so-
at the border. Development in
Right.
Union Square, Somerville,
Exactly.
affects Cambridge.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Development in, or just job patterns in Kendall Square
Yeah.
affects Somerville and
Oh.
Boston and anything.
So is this
Boston.
sort of a trend that other cities have done? Because it seems to me it's the way it should be. It's like when you look at, there's a life cycle assessment, which is in the whole waste and recycling world. Same idea, is that you don't look at one, you see, how does that transportation cost of that item affect this and the blah, blah, blah. You look at the whole thing, and that's what this is going to do.
Ideally, yes.
Every
Which-
city's
that would be
required
great.
to have a master plan,
Yeah.
and the version and how they do it and how they meet that
But what's
requirement
great is that, because
different.
then you
but-
can refer to parts of it and say, okay, this affects this, and then
Yeah.
it gives you a framework.
Well, you know,
Yeah.
one I think is the something we have to get better at is,
Yeah.
you know, if you look at any other part of the country,
Mm-hmm.
Cambridge, Somerville, Everett, Chelsea would all be part of Boston, right? And when, you know, it's
Or part of the county
part of
planning
the county,
district.
right? But
Yeah.
but cities are, you know, you look at LA, right? It's huge,
Yeah.
and
We are-
we are
we're
these
like-
little fiefdoms,
That's exactly right.
and we
Yeah.
don't talk to
It's
each
a-
other.
It's a New Englandy
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
These little competing fiefdoms,
Yeah.
and it makes planning really difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm glad we're doing some sort of planning exercise. I suspect that 75% of what comes out of it or more may end up being identical to what we're doing now.
Right.
Right? But hopefully a few good
But at
ideas
least
will
then
roll of
it's
it.
something,
Will roll
yeah.
from this. But what we still haven't quite nailed down though. I think was it Mayor Marr or someone was, maybe Rossi was, they had some sort of a compact along some of the urban core cities where they were going to try and look at job creation, a lot of things a little bit more holistically amongst multiple
Yeah.
cities. So.
Yeah. So we got to get better at that, though.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
because what happens in Somerville impacts us and
Right.
Boston and vice
Right.
versa.
Yeah,
So-
we're sister cities, Somerville,
Right, there you
Somerville
go.
and Cambridge, absolutely. Now another item that was begun, I personally, I tend to associate this primarily with Dennis Benzan, but there was a lot of effort about STEAM and STEM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, right? Only we got to put the math up front, right? Just kidding.
Doesn't
It doesn't
Sound as good.
sound
Yeah.
as good. Right? But the thing is, they met zillions of times. I think that multiple committees were meeting on this. In the end, I think the tangible result was a hiring of some coordinator that made it into the budget. But will actually anything tangible come of this in terms of the goal, which was, can we find a way of matching kids who grew up in this city to the economy that is in the city?
Yeah. There's the position that you mentioned, and the Foundry building, right?
Which will be an opportunity
to
carry
do a
some
lot
of
of
it
it.
out.
And and Dennis and I talked about this a lot. And to me, I think we have to do this work, right? Especially with the industry that we have here in Cambridge. But we have to broaden the conversation. Can't just be about high schoolers, right? Because you can't start it there. I mean, I'm a big early childhood education guy. I think the achievement gap starts before kids even enter the public schools.
Right.
And unless we are doing more to ensure that the kids that we're talking about, it's not my kids we're talking about, right? Which is good. We shouldn't be talking about my kids. But it's kids who come from lower income families, who aren't able to access that innovation economy. if we're really going to help them access that innovation economy, we have to make sure that they have high quality early childhood education first.
That's right.
Because they're going to be too far behind if in
Yeah.
high school we say, oh, now we're going to give you this internship. Well, that's not going to not going to be the door, the open door that we hope it's going to be
Right.
until we deal with the early childhood.
And you certainly can't expect, Kendall Square businesses just to do everything purely as an act of charity. They want qualified people.
Right, and it depends on what the job is, right? I mean,
right.
I expect them for the jobs that aren't the PhD level or the technical level. I do expect them, and one of the things the housing committee looked at was, can we require some of these businesses to hire a certain percentage of Cambridge people? If you're hiring security, if you're hiring people to, office work, if you're hiring people to do jobs that are skilled but not necessarily
I remember
they're not building the robot,
Right.
then those
Yeah.
people should be Cambridge people
Yeah.
as much as possible. When you get higher up there, then it really becomes down to what's your degree, what's your experience, and those businesses aren't gonna, they're gonna hire the best people that they can, and our job is to make sure Cambridge people are the best people for those jobs, but they're not going to do that out of the goodness of their heart.
That's right.
So we have to fix the educational system for everybody first.
I personally, I've heard the two toughest nuts to crack in the city that's number one, right there. It's most important and the hardest to solve.
Which is
It's just
opportunity to.
creating those opportunities and creating a path, for the American dream for these kids, so that they can really not get stuck where they are. It's absolutely important. The other one, as I mentioned earlier, was just the general issue of affordability of housing, and I don't necessarily mean just subsidized or go to the housing authority, but just an ample supply. At least we're making some inroads on that.
And I think one thing we talked about too is, are there ways that we can create a voluntary program for landlords like yourself who keep rents below market rent, and you get something for that, right? So there's some incentive for landlords to say, I'll keep my 30% below market rent or whatever it is. I don't know what the number is, and then in return, maybe there's a tax credit that they get, or maybe there's something else that can provide some sort of incentive for them to do that.
There was a time for many decades, where owning a multifamily house was the way you created affordability of housing for both the owner, right, who is willing to then work on the building themselves to some degree, and the tenants they would house.
Yeah. And there was a lot of ways to keep family, in the same. That's where I am.
Oftentimes it was the family that lived in the other units.
The families that live in the units, and that's where back to the Barrett petition. The thing that I like about it is that if you can, renovate your basement, then that could provide a place for your kid who's coming back from college who wants to live here but can't afford it, and that's one way that we can help people stay here or come back here.
It's a good creative use of existing resources.
Yeah, absolutely
right.
No, I like it.
Now, you did mention the Foundry building as one of the venues through which some of the STEAM/STEM type things might happen. Where does that stand right now? I know there's a Foundry Advisory Committee. The Cambridge Redevelopment Authority rose like phoenix from the ashes, are now this vital agency.
They are. I'll tell you, they are amazing.
Yeah.
And I have such respect for the people who work there.
They are calling the shots for the Foundry.
They are. And there's this advisory committee. I'm actually trying to put together a tour of. I don't know if you've ever been over to Artists for Humanity. Have you heard about Artists for Humanity?
Is that downtown?
They're in Boston. They're in South Boston.
I've been to an event there. Yeah.
Spectacular program, right? Where it really it pulls in high school kids and I think some middle school kids, and they generate their own money partly for having by having events, but the kids will create art. They create art. They create all the city hired them to create all these bike. What am I talking about? Where you lock up your bike.
The lockups.
And bike racks.
Bike racks.
And they made all these, really beautiful
but
bike
where's
racks.
the funding coming from?
And so Boston paid them to do that. Someone can order. They have a print shop, so you want to order T-shirts
But where
for your
did the
company.
initial fund?
I think
the building was donated, or is it?
I don't
See,
know
it's a
where.
big
I don't know how they
building.
got the building, but that would. When I think of what the Foundry could be, and I'm not saying it has to be
No, but
them,
that's a good
but
model,
it's a great model where they incorporate all these different STEAM type experiences in this one building that is financially self-sufficient, and it involves youth. So I'm setting up a tour with the Foundry Advisory Committee to go over there and take a look at it.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Good idea. Now, another item which is not only figuratively but actually on unfinished business, is the Volpe petition, Volpe site. Now, my understanding is that petition as stands may not make it at this point, but there may be an opportunity for refiling or other action.
Yeah.
A wise man said to me yesterday that this would be a perfect opportunity for Councillor Carlone, as a practicing architect who knows about these things with a lot of experience in there, to play a bit of a lead role in making something good and creative happen there. Just to work with all the fellow city councilors to see if it's possible to come up with some sort of a zoning that could work. This is a role he could play well.
Yeah. Certainly he has the experience to do so. My feeling is, I don't know if we have to come up with a whole zoning plan. I'm sort of feel like, let's provide Volpe with what are the requirements that we demand as a city. 25% affordable housing, certain percentage of open space, height. It doesn't have to be in a whole official sort of zone. And say to them, look, you bring this to whoever you hire as a developer.
Can they meet
and
this?
can they meet this or not? The problem that I have with this now is that we don't know Volpe's financial picture. And we as a city are being asked to sacrifice what we want so that Volpe can afford to get their building built. Well, if anybody has to sacrifice, Volpe should be sacrificing, and we should hold firm to what we want that land to be. Right. And if they can find a developer who can meet that, great, because I would like to see it developed. If they can't find a developer, then they have to modify their plans for their building to make it work.
Or just stick around for another 50 years.
Or stick around, right? And
they didn't take it away from us. They're offering it to us. So in
Anyway,
a sense,
we're down. As always, time always flies here.
Yeah.
So we're
But
down
I'm just
to our
saying, it's not like.
Yeah.
I mean.
Anyway, we're down to our last 10 seconds.
Possibilities.
So we're gonna have to call it quits until another time. But you'll be back at some point.
anytime you want.
All right. Anyway, until then, this has been another edition of